I'll just switch on the video here. So here we are. Nice to see those of you who've made it live. It's always really, it's lovely to feel that people are there right here, right now. So I know some of the people who registered didn't realise it was actually not US friendly. I apologise for that. I know some of you it's 4 a.m. your time or 2 a.m. Although we have got a couple of people who've turned up at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. their own time. So thank you for that dedication. If you wouldn't mind, just put who you are and where you're from in the chat, and we'll just quickly catch up with the different places. It's Janine who's in Costa Rica, 2 a.m. Thanks for coming, Janine. Mark is in Wangaratta. That's typical West Australian joke with the Eastern Australia definition. Wangaratta. All right, Naomi, yes, there will be a replay, technology willing. Yes, Mary Geraldton, Lucia, Melbourne, Janet from Melbourne, soon to be joining me over in Paris. Looking forward to that. Frode from Norway, Megan from Pingelly, Marg from the UK, and we've got Sue from the UK as well, Linda from Belgium, Naomi Robertson, New South Wales, yes, and Tony, UK. Man, it's getting a bit hard to keep up with this. So lovely to see you all here. It's nice to have representation from all different parts of the world, although, as I mentioned, this one is not so much US friendly, so I imagine most of our US friends are going to be picking this up on the replay. If you are from the US, just let us know you're here. Oh, Roland from Montreal, so it's pretty early in the morning for you, yeah, up there. And who says, Irene, yeah, north of Sweden, sunny and really hot. Well, I'm really hot. I don't know why. Anyone who's ever done webinars with me knows I seem to get all fired up at the start of a webinar. So eventually it'll cool down enough for me to leave my glasses on. All right, let's quickly get into this webinar because I want to have time to go through. It's a lot of stuff to try and cover here. This is not, let me just say up front, PET is not a technique or an approach that I can explain in a 75-minute webinar, but I'll do my best to give you the essence of it. Just a warning, there will be adult themes, there will potentially be non-politically correct language. PET tends to use and exaggerate stereotypes to get people thinking in different ways and to challenge their thinking. We tend to play with those things rather than necessarily believing them ourselves, although most stereotypes have a grain of truth or sometimes a chunk of truth associated with them. If you're going to participate in this, you have to be you have to have a working sense of humor, you have to be able to handle that stuff, and you really have to have an understanding of warmth and relationships to understand that behavior is contextual, communication is more about how it's said and the relationship within which it occurs than what is said. PET, as I said, is an advanced approach. This webinar will not qualify you to do PET or to say you're a PET practitioner. It's just an introduction to some of the theory and practice of the approach. Hopefully, I'll give you, my aim is to give you a couple of things you can take away to use for yourself and also to help you in your work with other people. But if you want to become a practitioner, you can go to our website, EFTdownunder.com, click on the PET link up the top and find out all the details about that. I will mention that briefly at the end of this webinar for those of you who are interested. Okay, quickly through the disclaimers. This is for educational purpose. This is not medical advice. The techniques I'll be talking about and also potentially using in this, if we have a time to do some coaching, they are considered experimental. So simple energy techniques, our simple approach to tapping, and provocative energy techniques, our approach which combines tapping with the provocative style and techniques. They're really experimental and there's no guaranteed outcome for any particular individual, and therefore you must take full responsibility for your own use of them. And particularly if you are a person who happens to be watching this who has mental health issues, you should always consult your physician and or therapist before using any of these techniques. All right, just some ground rules and housekeeping. The call is being recorded. You've already been told that. If you're participating, you give permission to being recorded. I will be taking live questions both in the chat, so you can type in the chat down the left-hand corner, and at a little bit later on, I'll open up for question and answers. And I do actually have a volunteer. Irene volunteered presume that's you, that Irene, that says, yeah, you're north of Sweden and it's sunny and really hot. Is that you, Irene? So if you're going to speak with me, you must use a headset or headphones to avoid a nasty echo. That is non-negotiable. If you know tapping already, you can start tapping right now and tap along, and you will gain the benefits of that. Hi, Jacob. Good to see you here. Good morning for you. Good afternoon for me here in Western Australia. All right, here's what we're going to try and get through. The impossible dream is that we're going to go through, I'll give you a basic introduction to the theory and practice of PET, what it is, how it was developed, some of the key features and the advantages of using this approach. For those of you, for example, who are using other energy techniques like EFT and so on, who might want to integrate this into your approach, or for anyone who's a coach or counselor or therapist or helper who wants to use these techniques. There's a bunch of advantages of using these techniques in this approach in your general work. So I'm going to go through the basic principles and goals of the approach. We'll look at some of the essential patterns and techniques. Hopefully leave you with some basic patterns you can use for yourself and with others, and I'll give you the details, as I mentioned, about how to train in PET if you do want to go further. But my aim is to give you as much value as I can in the time that we have. All right, so that's why I'm talking fast, because I know an hour and a quarter is not very long. So let's get straight into it. What is PET? What is Provocative Energy Techniques? Hi, Lucinda. Lucinda is actually one of our PET practitioners. She's over in Melbourne, and you'll find her details on our website if you want to go and see someone who uses PET and get an experience of this. So PET combines tapping or meridian point stimulation, and the version that we use we call simple energy techniques. For those of you who know EFT, it's a simplified version of that. Hi Monica, glad to see you did get on your iPhone. That's good, she's up in Italy. So we combine the tapping with the paradoxical and communicational patterns and style drawn from provocative therapy. And essentially, it's an integration of these two innovative therapeutic approaches. We also incorporate different concepts and techniques from the work of Milton H Erickson, the famous hypnotherapist and family therapist, psychotherapist, also from brief strategic therapy and paradoxical therapy. And essentially, the formula is humor plus paradox plus energy tapping equals rapid and lasting change. Now, of course, you can never encapsulate everything within one, one formula, because it's also things like a strong connection and excellent rapport and all those things which are assumed in that. So one of the things that's a key element of PET and where most of you will be coming from is tapping. And so we combine tapping or meridian stimulation with the provocative style and paradoxical techniques. So if you know tapping, then you can start tapping now. If you don't know tapping and you stumble across this, then just have a look at this diagram and just use 2 fingers of your dominant hand and just tap on each one of these points. And just doing that tapping as we go along will, first of all, be relaxing for your mind-body system. Secondly, you can use it in a focused way to relieve issues, and you can also use it to progressively tone and tune down your stress and bring up your good life energy and your body energy, get your energy to flow. So these are the main points that are used in SET. They're the same points that are used in EFT and TFT, thought field therapy. EFT is emotional freedom techniques created by Gary Craig. And SET, as I mentioned, is essentially a simplified version of tapping, a simplified version of EFT. So quickly through the basics of that set tapping, because this is a core part of the provocative energy techniques, is using the tapping process and applying that to help people to get relief from suffering and to get over their problems and to get their life back, essentially. So the basics of tapping using set or simple energy techniques is you can tap, you can rub, or you can just gently hold the points. You can do that in any order. And, for those of you who haven't seen it before, I will come back to the diagram. And what I might do is just read off my notes instead so that you can see the diagram if you need to be able to use the techniques. So Okay, so you can tap, rub, or hold the points. You can do it in any order. You can focus on whatever you're aware of. So you can focus on the thoughts, or you can focus on the feelings. You can focus on body sensations. You can tap directly where you're focusing on problems, or you can just tap indirectly. So when we're doing PET, we have people tap on these points the whole time, whether or not they are focusing on issues. So even when we're just talking around the issue, or we're just getting feedback or whatever, we continue the tapping. And that continual tapping is one of the things that makes the SET, the simple tapping approach that we use, different from EFT. We also use a mindful approach, and we use what we call acceptance tapping. And this is also part of PET, is that we accept whatever's there and we go with that. We like to focus on the negative. So I know there's a lot of people around who put positives in, and they use positive setup statements and stuff like that. We actually prefer to emphasize and exaggerate the negatives, because with the provocative style, we're playing devil's advocate whilst being on the side of the angels. So I'll get into the provocative style in a moment. Just in terms of the tapping, the more tapping you do, typically the better results that you're going to get. So you can tap, as I say, in any order, any amount of times on the points on either side of the body. And even if you don't remember all of them, you can tap on just some of them. And you can also tap on the hand points using the thumb of the same hand. And this is a discrete way of doing the tapping in public or wherever you go. You can also, of course, tap on them like this, and a lot of people do this. In EFT, they typically don't necessarily use the hand points, except some people who are using the longer version. We like to teach people all these points and then let them choose when and how they're going to tap on any of those points. All right, so that's just a few things about the tapping. I'll also say we found that if you tap daily, that progressively your stress will come down and your good life energy will come up, typically. Let me say something here about EFT, because in EFT, when you have problems, you have setup statements. And the classic setup statement is, even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely accept myself. And what we found when we were using this was, you know, in the early days, David Lake, when I say we, I'm talking about myself and my good friend, Dr. David Lake. He is a co-creator of PET with me. I'll just put up his photo of us in our Paris workshop a couple of years back. And you know, when we first started learning EFT, we were doing what everyone else was doing. We were using it as basically a straightforward, linear, logical approach with people, where you just focus on the problem and you say these setup statements. Even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then we started to challenge this. And the other thing is that we started to, you know, whether you needed it or not. And anyone who knows about SET, you'll know that we now have, we don't use setup statements most of the time. But when we were using EFT, we were doing setup statements. We noticed that most people didn't accept themselves. So when you had them say, even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely accept myself, which in EFT you're supposed to do that while you're tapping on this karate chop point, or while you're rubbing on a spot on the chest here, this sore spot on the chest, and you make this setup statement, and then you frame the problem in that way. Well, we noticed that people would not accept themselves at all, and when we said that, they would have a big reaction. And so, of course, because we learned in provocative therapy, which is what we ultimately integrated into PET, we learned to go with what was there rather than oppose that. And so instead of trying to push this self-acceptance onto the person, we went with what was there, and we had them say, okay, say even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely reject myself. And of course, when using the provocative style, we do that in a humorous way, and we are playing with this concept. And it often provoked the internal reaction, I'm not that bad. The worst that it could do was have people say, yes, that is real, and that is true for me. And so we found that this was really an empowering way to go with using setup statements back when we were using them. Now, of course, we would, you know, if we were working on a problem, instead of using a setup statement, we just go with whatever the person is aware of that tells them that they have a problem. We just get them started tapping on that, and then we find the negative. And in PET, we like to exaggerate it, and we like to blow it up, and we like to play with it and so on. as I will go on to say. So welcome, Rachel. Nice to see you here. She says, tapping on I deeply and completely reject myself had a marvellous impact on me and had me creased up laughing mid-emotional trauma. Such a relief to say it instead of a positive affirmation. Absolutely, because when you say a positive affirmation, for most people, when they have a negative belief, the negative belief is stronger, and that's what comes up. So when you try and push the negative in against that, you try and push the positive in against that negative, you get the reaction to it. And again, if we have time to do a bit of coaching here, I hope to be able to show you how this works. Okay, so this is kind of where we began in putting the provocative approach into EFT, and then we also were challenging the way of doing the tapping and whether you needed to use setup statements or not. And we progressively developed our simple tapping approach, which became the tapping basis, or the way of using meridian stimulation within PET, which is an advanced approach incorporating the tapping and paradoxical and provocative communication and techniques. All right, so where did this come from? Well, first of all, let me just say, here we are. Well, these are the creators of this approach, myself and my good mate, Dr. David Lake. He is now pretty much retired and living over in Newport in New South Wales, the northern beaches of Sydney, where he's lived for quite some time. He's a grandfather now of 6 kids, and he's just leaving me to go and spread the word and spread the provocative virus while he enjoys the grandchildren, plays beautiful music through his tens of thousands of dollars, probably $100,000 sound system, relaxes on the beach and so on. So he is still doing a little bit of work. For those of you who want to do a bit of consulting with him, long term, you might be able to get a chance to work with him over Skype or on the phone or whatever. Or if you're in Sydney, you can still get to see David while he's still working about a day a week or so. Okay, so let me just go from here to, let's go here. A little bit about what PET is, and then I'll go back actually to what I was going to go into a minute ago about where it came from. I've given you the kind of tapping side of that. The other side of that is the provocative part. And so this is what we do. We deliberately use humor. We're not just using humor just, just to laugh for no, without being targeted. It's goal-oriented, and humor is used specifically and deliberately within this approach. So a lot of people, there's a lot of research on humor being helpful, but not a lot of people have learned to use it in a goal-oriented way like we do in Provocative Energy Techniques, and also in Provocative Therapy, which is where we develop the provocative style from mainly. It's an approach that involves intense rapport, a really deep level of rapport, compassion and empathy in the session, and it's beautiful to experience. It involves paradoxical intention and instruction regarding the problem, where we tend to encourage the problem, exaggerate the problem, and get into the negative. So it requires a willingness to be able to work with the dark side of being human. And as Frank Farrelly would say, we like to think the unthinkable, speak the unspeakable, and talk about the undoable with the client. I have a little picture of something. Let me just see if I can find this image of that. Here we are with Frank Farrelly. Now, Frank Farrelly is the guy who infected us with the provocative virus and taught us provocative therapy. Back in 1986, I attended a workshop in Perth with Frank Farrelly, and David Lake over in Sydney attended Frank's 1986 Sydney workshop. Then we both attended workshops the next time Frank was over in 1988, and then in 1990, and then we met in 1991 at an intensive workshop in Wollongong. And so this is provocative therapy, and Frank Farrelly created provocative therapy. Sadly, he passed away a few years ago, so you can't see him live anymore. But we've stolen all of his best jokes and some of his funniest lines, and we like to help him to live on through those. You can find out a bit about Frank at provocativetherapy.com, and you can also read his book, which is called Provocative Therapy. It's still available. You can buy it on Amazon or wherever. Okay, so this is provocative therapy, and in a nutshell, as Frank says, it's playing devil's advocate. Now, some people come in and they're like, oh, let me play devil's advocate, but they're not playing at all because they haven't got a playful energy. So it's very, very important that you have a playful energy. You're playing devil's advocate while being on the side of the angels, Frank used to say. Siding with the negative half of people's ambivalence towards themselves and towards change. And so what we do is we actually go with, in some ways, the energy which is against change, and we work on that. And this is why the tapping works really well with the provocative approach, because the tapping works on the negative, and the provocative approach really goes straight for that. And in this process, seeking to show people how they bind themselves and doing that in a way that promotes their self-knowledge and capacity for change, it makes it really obvious for people when you are playing devil's advocate with their belief system. It externalizes it for them so they can see how ridiculous it is. And it's very hard for them to be controlled by those kinds of negative thoughts and so on in future, especially when the exaggeration and the humor brings in a different energy. And you combine that with the tapping, the whole thing feels differently. So you can't think the same thought or access the same perspective on the problem without having a different feeling associated with it, typically, when it's working. So let me just, man, it's a big job to go through and try and encapsulate this, but I just want to give you a few key points. Provocative therapy is about creating an affective, a feeling experience for people, and to provoke them to engage in positive self-affirmatory and goal-seeking behaviours. We're using the client's resistance to change rather in order to promote change. So instead of pushing against resistance, which a lot of coaches, therapists, counsellors end up doing, trying to encourage people to change and then they don't, trying to tell them that they're okay and then they say why they're not okay, trying to emphasise that the future can be bright and they tell you why it's going to be terrible. Instead of doing that, we go with the doom and gloom and exaggerate and emphasise that humorously and perceptively within the client's own internal frame of reference, giving them reasons why not to change and why change would be bad, which are the same reasons they've been giving themselves in their own head. And that paradoxically allows people to consider the positive aspects of changing. Our friend Noni Hoffner in Germany, she says it's like if you imagine that the client and the therapist or practitioner are on a raft on the opposite ends, and the therapist practitioner goes over and sits on the client's end. Now, in order to balance, the client has to go and sit on the other end, otherwise the thing's going to tip over. And so that's what happens here. We're aiming to get into the client's world and mirror that back humorously and in an exaggerated way, extending the negative aspects. And that allows people to get in contact with positive aspects of themselves and draws out their strengths and resources. What a lot of people don't realise is that provocative, the root word of provoke is to draw out. And so provocative therapy is not about being aggressive or pushing at all. It's the opposite of that for most people. It's really about bringing out the resources from within the person. And so rather than trying to push stuff into people, you're actually getting them to reframe and to change things. So in provocative therapy, there's 5 main goals, and these are the same things that we see in PET. People start to assert themselves, they start to affirm themselves, they start to realistically and appropriately defend themselves, they engage in a process called psychosocial reality testing, which is a big word and way of saying they test their theories about how life is in reality. Frank says, skip the rhetoric, look at the performance. Skip what you're saying, let's look at your results. And that's what we do in PET, and it's the same in provocative therapy. The other thing is that people start communicating positive messages of warmth, affection, friendship, sexual attraction, and love as they experience them. They become able and empowered to be able to do those things. And the reason why they do that is because instead of us taking a positive approach where we try and get them to be positive and they end up staying on that other side, we actually go and take over that side and then they get to consider the other side. Again, this is harder for me to talk about than it is to do, so I hope that we'll be able to demonstrate some of this today. The challenge with PET is that it's something you ultimately have to really experience to understand. All right, so I could go through a whole bunch of, what I will do, I'm just going to skip through these because these are really important assumptions that underlie provocative therapy, and they're also part of PET. People change and grow in response to a challenge. People can change. Their fragility has been vastly overrated. Oh my gosh. People, a lot of counselors, therapists, practitioners treat people as if they're fragile China dolls. And you have to realize that you're really not. You've got a lot of strengths more than you believe you have. Now, you won't believe that because I tell you that. In fact, if I tell you that, you might say, well, no, I don't. Strangely enough, in this approach, we hold this belief, but we act as if it's not true in working with people, and then they come out and they discover that they're not so fragile. People's behaviours and attitudes can change whatever the degree of severity of chronicity. Now, Frank discovered provocative therapy working in a chronic institutional setting with people who were, in locked, closed wards, chronic schizophrenics and people who've been locked away with their mental disorders and mental health problems. And, he was able to create results with people that had essentially been written off by themselves and the system. So he says we have more potential, they have more potential than most clinicians and most people actually assume that they have. Adult experiences can be as significant as childhood experiences. Honestly, in the tapping world, everybody's fond of going back and working with past events, and past events can be very significant, and so can current events, and so can recent experiences. And so it's not just childhood experiences that are significant in people's life, and that's not the only place to go looking for where problems can be changed. Clients' behavior with a therapist or practitioner is a reflection of their habitual patterns. So you can, if you have a reaction to them, chances are that other people have a reaction to them. People make sense. We can understand people because we are a people. In this approach, you also you understand the concept of tough love, and the key to this is understanding that the most important messages are non-verbal. So one of the absolute keys to the provocative approach, and let me just go back to our logo for PET, is keeping your heart open, and that's why the heart is really up there in this approach. If you keep your heart open and you maintain a good connection with people, then you can say virtually anything and get away with it because the messages of warmth and acceptance are coming through your body. And in this approach, in PET, we see this not just as, it's not just rhetoric, it's actually a transmission. So the transmission of that positive accepting energy in PET is part of what does the healing, not just the techniques. If you have techniques and you don't have any love, then you're just a technician, you're just a mechanic. If you have love, but you don't have any techniques, then it's really nice and warm and fuzzy, but there's no real way forward to change. It's the combination of those things that brings this to life. All right, so let's see here. Let's go back to the essence of PET, and let's look at what some of the things that happen for people when they use this approach. The typical kind of results for the client when you use PET is that people are able to engage with the unwanted, unrecognized, and disowned parts of themselves. We all have parts of ourselves that we've disowned, and in PET, we want to actually bring that forth. The reality testing I mentioned happens, people gain a greater self-awareness, people start to change. Man, oh man, they can change really quickly. Self-acceptance happens as part of the process, and generally a light-hearted attitude. We talk about being infected with the provocative virus, and once you've been infected with the provocative virus, all you can do is pass it on. It's a light-hearted way of being in the world, and in fact, a lot of people, when you talk about what success is, one version of success is being able to take a weird pride in your own problems. Only I could stuff myself up so wonderfully. And when you have that kind of humorous look at your problems, you're no longer possessed by them, you're no longer controlled by them. You can laugh at them. And when you can laugh at something, it's changed. All right, well, I've been talking a lot, so I'm just going to have a little sip of my drink here. Feel free to have a sip of yours. I know you've been listening well. We've been going for about 34 minutes here, so I want to pause in a moment and see if we can get some questions and answers. All right. Firstly, though, for the practitioner, there's a real sense of freedom in using this approach. And you don't tend to get stuck because you have so many things available to you. Anything that you have ever seen or learned or heard or felt can be used in this approach. You can bring it out for the service of change for the client's benefit. It's very gratifying to see shifts in people in front of your eyes. And what also happens is that you tend to expand your own beliefs about what's possible and about what change is. And you start to understand that change doesn't have to be long and difficult and hard and painful. With PET, the client gets relief and they tend to enjoy the session, and so do you. And it's really the very opposite of burnout. So, I love this this photo from the Venice workshop. This poor lady who came out to work with me. But as you'll notice, we're laughing together at her problems, and that's what happens in PET. It's one of the things that I really, really love about it. Just want to skip through some images here just to show you some of the sense of what happens with PET in sessions. So some beautiful photos of David working in our Paris workshop. And I just want to show you this too, because here you see that the PET practitioner often says things with a smile on his face or her face or a twinkle in the eye, and the client tends to lighten up very quickly. The other thing that David Lake is particularly good at is cartooning and playing and exaggerating particular ways of being and so on. And so he can emphasize the client's despair with a "oh," which is what he's doing here in this session. What's lovely with PET is that you can be working with someone on a problem, and a minute ago they were crying or upset, and now they're just seeing it differently, feeling it differently. This is one of the ones that I look at with most, I don't know, it just gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling, because this is actually a couple of photos from when we went to the Philippines with the Empowering the Philippines program after oh gosh, I can't even think now, the typhoon, Yolanda typhoon that came through, massive typhoon, and we worked with some of the local people there who had really suffered quite a bit. And this lady, she didn't actually lose her kids, but there were a couple of times during the storm when she thought she had lost them because they got swept away. And she was really upset because her husband had chosen to go and try and defend the home rather than looking after her and the kids. So we did a session where I humorously encouraged her to, in her revenge thinking against her terrible, bad husband, and she just progressively lightened up and lightened up and lightened up, and at the end of the session she was able to talk about doing all those bad things to him, but it was clearly humor rather than that horrible feeling that was possessing her before. It's also gratifying to see people practicing PET sessions. And here you see, for example, at the top here is Jackie Manning, one of our PET practitioners, and down the bottom here is Ed Fields, one of our PET practitioners in the US. And there's fantastic kinds of reactions and results that you get from people when PET is being used. All right, so where can we go from here? Tell you what, so can this be used with couples? No, yeah. Well, all right. So let's get a few questions and answers going. We'll do 5 or 10 minutes of questions, and then I'll come back to the presentation. Naomi says, can this be used with couples who've come in together for tapping? Absolutely. The challenge for the practitioner is really, like, if you have a look at our logo, it's really a balancing act here, and it's really, really important to maintain that balance. So when you're with a couple, you might, for example, take one person's side and say, oh yes, he's terrible, isn't he? You know, he's an unfit husband of the year. But then you need to make sure that you do that with the other partner so that it's kind of equal time. David Lake has done some fantastic work with couples, and some of our DVD programs have captured those. So, you know, you can find them on our Brussels PET program, the Paris workshop, and I'm not sure if he did a couple in Sydney. Certainly those other two, there's a couple sessions that he did, and also in the Healing High Rise event as well that we did up in Brussels. There's David did a couple session there, so you can see how tapping is used with couples and how PET can be used with couples. Mark says, emphasizing that it's not just what we say, but how we say it. Absolutely. This is really, 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 really crucial. If you are not in the right feeling state with it when using this approach, you shouldn't be using it. If you don't have a good connection, if you don't feel accepting towards the client, if you don't have your heart open, and if you're not able to say things in a humorous way, for example, you need to cartoon things. You need to be able to have a smile on your lips when you're saying the thing. Otherwise, if you're just deadpan, then they just feel like you are just giving them back their negatives. You're not just giving them back their negatives. You're giving them back their negatives in an exaggerated way so they can see them. And you know, I have a couple of quotes here. Let me see if I can find where they are. I'm going to have to look on here. Right, let's see here. 31. Okay, so first of all, body language is so powerful it can wipe out the messages of speech. So, you know, I know Albert Moravian did some research on this and found that when you vary factors, that the verbal content only has, in interpersonal communication, only is about 7% of impact. About 38% of your impact is tone of voice, and about 55% on average is body language. And so if you are communicating caring and acceptance and love with your on the bodily level, the majority, and in terms of the way you're saying it, then the verbal content, which is really so small, is not the issue. It's more that the majority of the communication is accepting and nice, and the 7% is their negative verbal content, but you're doing it in such an exaggerated way that they can see how ridiculous it is. So there's a lot of this pattern interruption that, you know, like in this quote by Palazzoli here, where people expect a certain message and instead they receive a different message. And so this is not a predictable approach, it's an unpredictable approach. When someone says, you know, this is really bad, this is really sad, you're supposed to go, oh dear, I'm so sorry, rather than saying, oh, well, that just means, you know, you're obviously clearly a bad parent, you know, you must be the unfit parent of the year, tapping into their guilt, you know, and so on and so forth. That's unexpected. But if you do that within a good connection and a good rapport, the person is going to laugh and say, well, yeah, okay, that's the way I think, but that's not really the truth. Lucia says, can you do PET by yourself at home? You can do a little bit of it. And so one of the things that I am going to leave you with today is a suggestion that you just try exaggeration. So, for example, and this is what Rachel was saying she's already tried on the way here, and Rachel's done a fair bit of practice with this approach and experienced it as well, so she knows a lot more about the flavour of it. Just take your problems and instead of just working on them in a serious manner, take the negative, whatever the negative is that you're thinking, and just exaggerate it and make it 10 times worse. Now, if you're able to exaggerate it and make it 10 times worse, then the tapping and the exaggeration will turn things around. If it makes you feel worse or you get depressed, stop doing that and go see somebody else, because there's some things that you can't do this on, you're too close to in terms of your own problems. All right, so any other questions here in the chat? I see Rachel typing something, so I'll wait till that comes through. While we do, actually. still choose to see Steve, I would say. No need. Okay. Let me give you a couple of other things here, and then I might see if we can call Irene and do a little bit of, see if we can demonstrate some of this. Naomi says, seems it would be important to get the laughing with instead of laughing at thing right. Absolutely. It's us both sitting together laughing at your problem, because it's everybody's problem. We all have this stuff. And as Frank Farrelly says, what's most personal is most universal. So if you don't have a good connection, if you don't have good rapport, you can't do it. And if you're not on the side of the client and understanding them from within their point of view, then you're not going to do it very well anyway. Now, a couple of aspects of this, if I was just going to give you a couple of principles to take away that are helpful no matter whether you decide to get involved in doing more PET or whether you just want something that's going to help you in your life, or whether you want to get better results with clients. One of them is a thing called requisite variety. And this came from cybernetics. It's a concept that says basically the individual with the widest range of responses controls the outcome of the interaction. And so Richard Bandler and John Grinder, who created NLP, they modeled Frank Farrelly early on, and they incorporated a lot of those learnings into NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. They said Frank is an exquisite example of requisite variety because he's essentially able to adapt to each different person. Frank said one day, I'm going to be a verbal, emotional, visual, metaphorical, whatever, chameleon. And whatever the client does, I'm going to do that. What they are, I'm going to be that. But I'm going to do it in an exaggerated way so they can see the truth. And he says, I invented new therapy for each client. And this is the same thing that Milton Erickson used to say, is instead of just coming in with a set idea, create a therapy based on this person. And that means you've got to be able to match their communication. You've got to be able to match their language. You've got to be able to use their metaphors that resonate for them. You've got to be able to use humor in a way that's funny for them. So, Australia, we use a lot of humor, which is very much play on words. But when we go up to Europe, of course, because people don't speak English as their first language often, it doesn't translate. So you have to use humor, which is appropriate for that particular culture and within that culture with that particular person. So I always want to know, what does this person find funny? And what's funny from within their point of view, and what makes them laugh, And sometimes you have to try a few things before you get it right. But the more you're in tune with the other person, the more you're paying attention to them, and the more you have flexibility and requisite variety to be able to adapt to whatever's there, then you can use this with more people. A second major concept other than requisite variety is the concept of when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And I love this quote by Jerry Richardson. He says, the only sure way to take control of a situation is determine what the prevailing reality is and get into agreement or alignment with that. So the prevailing reality when you're dealing with someone with an issue or problem is often the energy of the problem. And instead of opposing that, where you get a lot of resistance, we actually go with that. And a classic example is if someone believes that they're stupid, then of course, most mothers, friends, coaches, counselors, practitioners will try very hard to get the person to realize that they're not really stupid, that they're really very clever and so on. Whereas we will go, okay, let's accept that. And when you accept that and go, okay, you're stupid, you can even say, okay, I don't really believe this, but for the sake of the exercise, you're stupid, okay, since that's what you're thinking and believing. Now let's go on as if that's true. And we're going to act as if that's true, and we're going to exaggerate it. And then we'll be exaggerating your stupidity. Now, this is not going to be something that you're going to be able to just do from this webinar if you don't understand the flavor of how to do this. And so, I'm hoping to make available plenty of stuff online. I have actually a stack of recordings from Frank Farrelly workshops that I'm ultimately going to be uploading, so people will be able to see this and capture the feeling of this and the flavor of this and understand how to do it in a way that it works. Because it isn't just saying to someone who believes they're stupid, okay, you're stupid. It's actually from within their frame of reference, getting that thing out, and also doing the cartooning of that in a way that they can see that you're just playing with that concept. You don't really believe it. You are playing devil's advocate whilst being on the side of the angels. And that is absolutely, absolutely crucial, that you are always with the client in terms of your connection and your rapport and feeling state, whilst poking fun and exaggerating, as David Lake likes to say, giving the problem a really good kicking. We never give people a kicking, but we do give the problem a really good kicking sometimes. Okay, so I've already put this quote up about body language and so on. There's a lot of techniques that we use which could be called paradox. And in paradox, we're basically saying yes to what is. And the tendency as human beings is to say no to what is. You know, we want to deny the reality that we don't like. We want to push against the feelings that we don't want to feel. And unfortunately, what we resist tends to persist. And so, you know, I first learned about this when I was studying the Mental Research Institute's brief therapy group, Paul Watson-Lewick, John Wickland, and a bunch of others, Jay Haley and so on. And they basically believed, hey, when you get resistance for change, which we all get, every time you go to change, you get resistance. Even when you try and change yourself, you get resistance. And that resistance is part of you that needs to be understood and that needs to be validated. And so they saw resistance as a response to the pressure of change. And if you get resistance when you're working with someone, you as the therapist or practitioner are not really understanding the problem. And so paradoxically, accepting and even encouraging people to resist reduces people's anxiety about changing. And when the therapist or practitioner resists, it's very hard for the client to resist. This concept of paradox and laws of paradoxical change, which kind of go opposite to what we normally expect, is really hard to explain to someone who's never encountered it before. But believe it or not, when you want to change something, instead of trying to undo it, you can get there faster sometimes by aiming to increase it. And if things are shrunken or contracted, you can contract them more. And you amplify the problem responses rather than trying to make them decrease. And what that does is it has a paradoxical, it has an opposite effect to what you expect. Okay, now I could go through a whole bunch of different paradoxical interventions and why those work. Let me just give you a why they work. Paradox works because when you're using paradox with someone, you are creating a double bind. So the best double bind is where people cannot lose. So for example, here's a classic paradoxical intervention. Who was this? I can't remember. Oh, Stephen Langton. And he had a client who said, she said, I can't say no. And they was in a group. And so he says, okay, I want you to do this exercise. I want you to go around the group and say no to everyone in the group. And she says, I'm not going to do that. No, I can't do that. And of course, she was saying no and demonstrating that she could say no. So if she did the exercise and she went and said no to everybody, she was winning. If she said no to doing the exercise, she was winning. That's a classic therapeutic double bind, which is the opposite of the double binds that kind of hold us and stick us and stop us from being able to get out of our problems. You know, I'm just realizing as I say this, I may not have explained enough about, you know, the different types of paradox and different types of paradoxical techniques. But one of them in particular that's very common is called prescribing the symptom. Instead of trying to get people to change, get them to continue to have the problem. And if anyone's ever heard of Viktor Frankl, the famous psychiatrist who was in the, oh, I may have just turned my volume down there, excuse me. He was a psychiatrist who actually had spent time in Auschwitz in the work camps. And anyway, he developed an approach called logotherapy. And within logotherapy, he had an approach called paradoxical intent, where he encouraged people, for example, in situations where they got anxious, to go in that situation and try to bring on the anxiety. And the therapeutic double bind of that is that if you can deliberately create it, that means that you are in control of it. If you try to deliberately create it, often when you try to deliberately create it, it won't come because this is the challenge of, this is the paradox, is that things like this that presumably control us, they have to control us unconsciously. When we consciously try to control them, then they go away. It's like when you accept rather than resist, then everything settles down. So to request people that they continue what they're already doing doesn't compound the problem either, whereas a lot of other solutions do compound the problem, and sometimes the solutions that we try to bring in actually make things worse. Let me give you a couple of case examples of my own, and then we'll go to Irene and see if we can do a little bit of positive provocation. So this is just 4 examples of my own. I may not have time to go through all these. We'll just see, and anyone who wants to find out more can get this in our PET manual. When I first learned about this thing of using paradox, I started looking to how I could apply it. And at the time I was working with a client. She was a student who was failing her exams, and she came to me and she says, "Oh, I just worry too much." And I said, "Okay, well, tell me what you're worrying about." And she's told me the situation at home, and so she had an alcoholic father who was very abusive. She had the parents were arguing and fighting all the time. She had difficult other situations with siblings. She was having trouble with her courses, and I did my first paradoxical intervention. I said, "Oh my gosh, you're worrying, but it sounds to me like you have a lot to worry about." So instead of pushing against the worry or telling her not to worry, because it's what people do. They say, "Oh, don't worry. Worry is really bad for you. There's no worry won't help." In fact, I was saying, "Hey, you've got a lot to worry about." Validation. At that moment, people go, there's an acceptance there. And when you now combine this approach with tapping, which I've done since, it just really accelerates that shift that happens. And then I said to her, "Okay, look, it seems like you've got a lot to worry about, so I think you should deliberately do some worrying every day." And I prescribed some worrying. And I said, "Okay, let's work out what's the best time. And I want you to actually spend that time worrying about this stuff because it's really important to you." And okay, so I said, "Look, if you think of something to worry about, put it down in your worry diary." And so she does this. She comes back a few days later. She says, "It's no good. I can't worry when I try to." And this is the thing about paradox. It's so wonderful when it happens. Anyway, so then I said, "Well, look, no, we've got to actually do this." And so I encouraged her to keep on doing it. And the next week when she came in, I said, "How did you go?" She said, "Well, I did it for a couple of days. And then I just thought, well, this is crazy. And I just did my homework instead." And she hadn't worried since. Essentially, her pattern had been interrupted by encouraging it, but putting it into a specific format rather than just pushing against it where you get resistance. The sleeping client was a client I had who was finding that he was actually falling asleep during the day. He was sleeping in and not getting up on time, all kinds of things. And it was essentially the same basic approach. Instead of saying, "Okay, we've got to fix that," I said, "Okay, obviously you need a lot of sleep, so let's get you going to bed early." And instead of trying to work all night and falling asleep like he was doing, I actually had him going to bed early, and then he found that he could wake up earlier and get his work done then. And his sleeping through the day problem was basically blown away within a week. The yes but game client is a client that I had when I was just learning the provocative approach, and I was still doing a little bit of kind of logical work with people, kind of trying to do goal setting and so on. And this guy comes in and he's like, "Oh, I've got this problem." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And his problem was, again, this was when I was working with students in schools, and he was studying and he wasn't able to get the study done. He was failing his courses. And so I started doing the logical thing. I started suggesting, "Well, why don't you try this?" And he says, "Yes, but I can't do that for this reason." And then I go, "Okay, what about this?" "Okay, well, I can't do that for this reason." And then after we'd been doing this for about half an hour, I finally realized that I was in a trap of pushing against resistance, and we were going nowhere. And I said to him, I said, "Oh my gosh, I just realized we've been playing the yes but game." He says, "What's that?" I said, "Well, this is where I suggest solutions and you tell me why you can't do it. And so you say yes but." I say, "Why don't you do this?" And you say yes but. I said, "I'm not going to do that anymore. And let's pretend for the sake of the argument that you've convinced me that it can't be solved. So, okay, it can't be solved." And he said, "You know what he said?" He said, "What do you mean it can't be solved?" I said, well, you know, we just spent half an hour going through all the possible solutions. It's pretty clear that it can't be solved. And he says, it must be able to be a solution. I'm like, well, hey, you know, we haven't found one, have we? He says, there is one. Anyway, so now he's arguing for change, and I'm the one who's doing the restraining. I'm the one who's actually taking his side, and by taking up that negative side, he's able to see possibilities where he couldn't before. And he says to me, he says, you put a date in, you know, in the calendar, and I'll come back and I'll prove to you that it can be changed. And he came back the next week, and he had solved the problem, and he had used the exact strategy, which was the first thing I had suggested to him, but he told me that he couldn't do it. So when he was in resistance, when we're in resistance, we can't even see possibilities that are right in front of us. Strangely brilliant when you go with the resistance and you take that over, people are able to see the other side. Okay, and this one swallow doesn't make a summer thing is another girl that I was working with. She'd been a street kid. She'd come off the streets. She was trying to really perform, and you know, so she's like, okay, I'm trying to do this, and I'm trying to do that, and I'm trying to get better. But I realized that a large part of her was not believing that she could do it. So I went with that part, and I'm like, well, yeah, okay, but you know, you can always go back on the streets, and hey, you know, you've been doing that for a while. It might be safer, and it's a lot easier than this, and hey, it's really hard to do this, you know, and people don't believe you, and they don't trust you, and all this kind of stuff, which was all true in her experience. And so then she comes in. The next week she comes in, and she puts down this thing on the desk, and she says, there. And she'd done this assignment in this English class that she'd been doing. And so I said this line, I said, well, hey, one swallow doesn't make a summer, you know. And, you know, just because the birds fly south, just because one bird turns up doesn't mean it's going to be summer, because that bird might be lost. Anyway, so she goes away again. She comes in the next week. She throws this pile of stuff on my desk, and she says, there, 17 swallows. And now, of course, I'm right into the provocative approach because it's so wonderful and it works. So I start saying, oh, well, hey, they might be a lost flock, you know. And we just had a lot of fun together whilst she was proving to me that she had changed. But she wasn't proving it to me. She was really proving it to herself. All right, let's do this. Let's change from listen-only mode to question and answer mode, which means that you can now speak. And what I'd like to do is to, Irene, if you are able to, if you can raise your hand, let me show you how to ask a question. So if you see here down the left-hand corner of the attendee list, which you don't see the attendee list because I've kept that that blank for those of you who want to be a little bit confidential. There's a little smiley face, and if you click on that, there will come up a thing that says raise hand. Click on raise hand, and then when you do that, you will be able to come through and speak with me using your microphone, and also, if you want, using your video. And so when you click on that little smiley face and you do the raise hand thing, this is what should happen next. You should get a button which appears. Once I let you through and give voice to you, then something will come up saying, you know, do you want to ask a question, and asking you to allow your camera and microphone access. So if anyone would like to ask a question, you can click to raise your hand. And Irene, if you're ready to come through and do your volunteer thing, now is the time. So where are you? If you're ready. Meantime, if anybody wants to type in the chat, you can do that as well, and I can answer questions in the chat. Here we go, Irene. So let me just click on you. So you should actually be receiving that now, and hopefully you will be able to okay, here we go. She's working. Very good. So Tony says, what benefits are there to using PET with pain? Well, there's pain and then there's suffering. So most of the pain that we experience is really the psychological suffering. And so I'm always interested in that. And, you know, I've seen some beautiful sessions, for example, with Frank working with, you know, he's working with a lady with terminal cancer. And it was absolutely beautiful how she was able to just get total relief from that. You know, you may have heard of Norman Cousins and his using humour as part of his process of healing himself. And I believe that humour itself is healing. So it's one of the best things to use with pain. Irene, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I am.
Oh, the video.
Would you like
Sorry,
to?
the video is off.
Yeah, if you can bring the video on as well.
Here
And then
I
what
am.
we'll do. Hello, here you are. Okay, so let's do this. What I'll do is I'll just change this so that we can go like this, and that way people can see us a little bit more. Okay, and we can still see the chat. All right. So, what's now you wrote to me, and what's the problem you want to work on? Oh, by the way, are you tapping? Do you know tapping? Oh, just disappeared. Are you still there? These are the joys of technology. All right, looks like we lost Irene from it. So let me go back to the previous layout so that I can find her in the chat and see if I can give voice again. Let's see if she's still there. Are you still there, Irene? Maybe you need to, maybe you'll need to click through again. It seems that you disappeared from us for a moment. Maybe that we don't have a strong enough connection for this. Meantime, I see Jacob has, all right, let me give voice to Irene and let's see if she can come back online while we look at Jacob's question here. How can I use a paradox on myself? E.g., one strives to get a girlfriend but unsuccessfully, believing I'm not able to get a girlfriend. Well, yeah, I would use all of your own reasons which you're currently giving yourself about why you can't get a girlfriend and exaggerate them. Yes, why even try? Let's go up exactly what you say. Now, actually, it's not so much that, you know, when you're doing this on yourself, it's very hard to be your own therapist. The main thing that you want to do is to shift the energy of this, shift the feeling of this, so that when you are saying to yourself, you know, why even try? Let's give up. What's the point? You know, these are the things that the thoughts that occur to people anyway, but you're actually externalizing them for a moment and exaggerating them. So if you do that while you're tapping, the key of this is if you can change something about how they feel for yourself so that they're not so heavy and so on. All right, Irene, let's try again. Hello.
Okay. Hi. This is so weird. Okay.
It's weird.
Okay, this is so weird.
This is so weird seeing yourself. Yes, it is weird. Well, maybe it's weird because we're all a little weird.
No, I mean sort of you in Australia and me here up here in the north. I mean, tapping's not weird.
Yeah. Oh, well, a lot of people think it is, I must say. So anyway, if they think it's weird, I go, yes, it's weird. Just do it anyway. So what's the problem?
The problem is that I live in the north and I want to move back to Stockholm, which is my town of origin. I come from Stockholm and I have my children there and my grandchildren, and I just find it so terribly difficult to actually do it. I've been sort of moving south for 40 years and I still haven't got around to do it. But now there's no work keeping me up here. I mean, I can do my EFT and have clients even in Stockholm, even more so. But just a thought of packing up and having to let go of my beautiful pack.
Yes,
it's awful. It really is awful. So much hard work.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
Tap. Yes.
Now, so in essence, what I'm going to do, and I've already started to do, this is just for the observers, I'm instantly agreeing with you. It's far too difficult to move house.
And actually, as you say that, I feel my eyes filling with tears. It just feels like it's true. I'm not going to be able to do it. It's too much.
Absolutely.
And my beautiful flat.
Yes. Well, if you, so for you, Irene, if it feels like you can't do it, then you can't do it.
But I want. You say I want to do it. I want to see my kids more because I feel lonely up here.
Well,
And I
I'm
have friends
sorry,
in Stockholm.
yes, you want to, but you want to not move more.
What was
If you
that?
wanted to move more, you'd be moving, right?
Yes, perhaps.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, let's
No,
just
I
say
want
the
to move
pain
a
of
lot, but
moving.
there's a lot of I'm sort of stuck. I feel stuck.
Yes. All right. So now there's lots of ways of working on this, but just say,
Yeah.
I'm stuck.
I'm stuck.
I'm stuck in, where are you? You're stuck in Sweden.
I'm stuck in Umeå.
Stuck in Umeå.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
Stuck
yeah,
in the
you
north.
don't have any. Yeah. But you don't have any ooh about Umeå.
That's a joke. I'm sorry. I
I
didn't mean
know.
that.
See,
I
this
have
is
no
why I
ooh
said,
about Umeå.
no, because ooh is like ooh yuck, right? Yeah.
Ah,
You
ooh.
have the, you have the ooh yuck about moving.
Ooh, yuck. I have the ooh yuck about moving. That's really, really true.
Yes. And the
Yeah.
ooh yuck about moving,
I have the ooh yuck about moving.
yes, it's too yucky.
It is pretty yucky. It's really
Not
yucky.
pretty yucky. It's
It's
horrific.
extremely yucky. It's
Yes.
terrifically yucky. It's really,
Well, it
really
has to be
terrifically
terrific. It's
yucky.
40 years worth of yucky, is it? 30 years? 40 years?
40 years? No, 38 to be. I mean, I mustn't exaggerate. It's only
30 years.
38 years.
Yeah, wow. If you're like me, I've only been in the place where we're living about 20 years, but we have accumulated so much stuff. Man, I don't know how they're going to get it all out.
Mhm.
It's not just
Mhm.
about moving you. It's all that stuff.
No, it's a stuff, and it's yeah. So the stuff is one thing, and the other thing is that this flat is so beautiful. It's really, really beautiful.
What's
And I
that?
don't think I can find another beautiful place in Stockholm because I can't afford it.
Okay, well, that's it then. Just say it's more beautiful.
So it's more
It's more
beautiful.
beautiful here.
More
And
beautiful
who is it
here.
you want to go and see? You want to go and see grandkids, did you say?
Yeah, my grandchildren. Yeah, my children and my grandchildren.
All right. Well, are
And
they
they're more
really ugly?
important. They are. I know they're more important.
I know, but are they really ugly?
No, they're so sweet. They're
Well,
really,
they're
really
not as
sweet.
beautiful as where you're living, right?
No, they
Just
can't
say
be
this place.
compared.
Just say this place is more beautiful than my grandchildren.
This place is more beautiful and more important than my grandchildren. Oh gosh.
What?
This place is more beautiful and important than my grandchildren. Of course it's not.
Well, it is. It isn't in the sense of in some mystical sense, but in the sense of behaviour, it is.
In a practical sense, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So just say I'm choosing beauty over otherness.
I'm choosing beauty over ugliness. Yeah, that. Mhm.
It's a horrible thing to say, really, isn't it? But I know they're not ugly. But
No,
think
no,
of the
it's not because when
responsibility of having to look after them.
as I say it, I make a difference between I choose beauty over ugliness, and that is really true. It's just that my grandchildren aren't on the sort of ugly scale.
Of course,
They're on
of
the. It's
course.
more on the important thing, yes. And you know that, but I'm just
Well,
saying it anyway because it makes me feel. It makes me feel sort of vulnerable and sort of soft in my heart.
yeah. So, but if you did go there, you wouldn't have the beauty of the environment, and you might have to actually look after them and stuff.
Yeah, I might. Ooh. I might have to look after them. But on the other hand, their parents are really close. So I mean, if they became unbearably
The
noisy, I could
parents
always.
just can't wait to have someone like you to throw the kids at. They're like, oh, thank
I didn't. I
God.
didn't.
Here, you know.
I didn't hear what you were saying here.
Well, I remember from when my kids were young, just having my mother to be able to send the kids
Yeah.
to her was fantastic.
It was fantastic having your mother close.
Well, yeah, so she could take the kids when we just did what we wanted.
Yeah, and I'd like to be that grandmother.
Well, I'm sorry you can't.
Okay, I can't because I'm stuck with all my stuff up in Umeå.
Yes, you are in a beautiful place.
Yes, in a beautiful place.
Yeah. Okay, so
And here we have.
this is just
So we,
one of several different ways of using this. I just want to ask you what's happening for you right this moment.
right this moment, I got this image of a. You know this story of the princess on the glass on the top of the glass mountain or something, locked in a sort of beautiful, kind of cool and alone place.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling, and it's not sort of a true feeling, but it's true inside of me. Part of it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you
And
need
makes me
some
feel
kind of.
teary-eyed.
Well, maybe you need someone on a white horse to come, charging up and pull on your hair or something like that. I'm not sure.
No, I need somebody to come and say, "Here's a beautiful, beautiful plaque, almost for free in Stockholm," or perhaps somebody else,
Come on.
somebody to marry
Yeah,
who's not
yeah.
that kind of place.
Okay.
No,
So just tap here and say, I'm waiting for a miracle.
I'm waiting for a miracle.
Yeah. And when a miracle comes,
And when a miracle comes,
then I'll move.
then I'll move. Oh God. Mm. Oh. Yeah.
What?
Well, it's the paradox of a really deep sadness. At the same time, there's
Yes.
this sort of, gosh, what are we doing? What am I doing with my life? Kind of deep,
Well,
deep
it's
understanding.
not what you're doing. You're the one stuck up on stuck up on the mountain. But
Yeah,
at
but I
least
can.
you have a really
I
good
mean,
view.
I have a really good view. Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah.
It's
Oops.
irreplaceable.
Another picture. Wait, hang on. There. You just disappeared.
Just so this view is irreplaceable.
This view is irreplaceable. And of course, it's
Yeah, I lost a bit of, I think we lost a bit of your volume as well. So just say that again.
and of course it's not. No.
Well,
What did you want me
yes.
to say again? It's not.
Hmm.
You've lost
Okay.
me here.
Well, let's just say you are lost.
I am lost.
Okay, just say I'm lost
I'm lost.
and I'm stuck
And I'm stuck
in a really beautiful place
in a really beautiful place
with all my stuff.
with all my stuff.
And I'm not moving out of here anytime soon.
I'm not moving out here any part soon. What a misery.
What's that?
What a misery.
What misery? What do you mean misery?
It is miserable. It's like, I'm sitting here with all my stuff and I'm not moving. I'm not going to get away from here. Because it's miserable. It's sort of stupid. And
It's not
silly and it's very,
stupid.
very, it's stupid and silly and very, very human.
Oh, yes, it is very human. Yes, but humans are stupid and silly. So welcome to the human
Yes,
race.
yes, in a way, and very paradoxically stupid and kind of funny at the same time.
Yes, just so I'm paradoxically stupid and funny.
Paradox is us. No, wait, say again.
I'm paradoxically stupid and funny.
It's paradoxically stupid and funny. Yeah.
But I'm not moving.
And I'm not moving.
No matter what you
I'm
say.
not moving. No matter
Yes.
what you say, you're not going to force
Yeah.
me to move from here. No.
Exactly.
No. No. I can do that job
So
really
just,
well on my own.
oh God, yes. So just let me just pause here for the listeners. So you see how crazy it would be to try and push against this, to try and encourage Irene, you know, in terms of moving and so on. She has some very significant personal reasons to stay the same. And what we're doing is we're actually bringing those out. And we're bringing the whole picture out so that you can see it clearly. Because there's this and there's that. And in this system, you can't have both. Is that right?
In what system you can't have both?
In your system, it's either stay in a
My
beautiful
system.
place with all your stuff or see the grandchildren.
Oh, oh no. I mean, I could carry on like I have been carrying on, sort of flying down to Stockholm, visiting them, and coming up. But then it's just a sort of a little bit of a contact, and I want more contact.
Well, what's the problem with, you know, occasionally you don't have to have them, you know, staying in your house, and, you know, you don't have to be responsible for them. You know, you don't have to move. You have to move all your stuff, you know, all those things. So what's happening in your body at the moment?
What's happening? I just felt sort of cooler. You can see I'm really sort of red in my face, and it is hot here. But I also feel very sort of agitated, and I feel very, very, very sad tapping.
Yeah, yeah,
Paradoxical,
because this
very
is,
sad. I mean, yeah, it's very, very sort of, it's a very deep thing, and on my, how should I say? Somehow I can see all these funny things with it, and it is
of
funny, and it's
course,
just, but it is
it's
so
funny and
sad.
sad at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And this is the key about this approach. We're not trying to take it and make it not sad and only make it funny. It's funny and sad. This is why the you know, they talk about the tragic mask and the comic mask. Neither of them on their own is the way life is. The tragic mask and the comic mask is life. You know, it's funny and ridiculous and sad at the same time. And so instead of just denying one of those and trying to go to one side, we're going to let it all be real. And we're going to tap on both sides of that, and we're going to let it sort itself out. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, and it's good to
All right.
acknowledge that both things are there.
Exactly. And you said for good reason. And it's funny for good reason too. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
But hey, I saw one of those hoarding shows, and there was a guy with a great big pumpkin in his lounge room that had rotted down to about this high. And they said, well, look, we just want to move it out of the room. And he says, no, I need to keep it, you know?
Uh-huh. A pumpkin.
Yeah. You've seen those hoarding shows?
Once again.
Those people who hoard things, you know, they just got lots and lots and
Yeah,
lots and
yeah,
lots of
hoarding.
stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit of a language
Yeah.
problem. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm Australian. We don't speak English.
Nor do I. I'm Swedish.
Anyway, I'm sorry, Irene. We're going to have to pause here, so we haven't solved your problem.
But actually, I'm not really worried about it because I have signed up for the whole course. I did that 2 or 3 days ago, and I realized this was a sort of beginner. So I'll have loads of time to work on it later and learn it because I really love this technique.
Well, I look forward to seeing you then. I won't be able to help you, but we'll have some fun.
I'm quite sure I'll be able to help myself somehow. Yes, I'm saying it. I'm saying it.
Thank you so much for volunteering.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Let me just take your voice back and we'll. Yeah, sorry, just did take it away. So, all right, I'm realizing the time here, and I'm realizing we've gone over time for those of you who are on a timeline. And I just want to say a couple of things about that. One is, you notice I'm actually trying to argue from Irene's perspective of why there's a challenge moving and all those things, and now she's actually considering the other side to those things. And we're not just making one side win, we're bringing both sides out. The paradox is that both coexist. You know, we try to make one side win. This is supposed to be all funny. Well, it isn't all funny. It's funny and sad, because there's a sense of, if I go there, I'm going to lose this, and if I go there, I'm going to lose that. And yet, you know, it's ridiculous. Why am I so attached to this, and why am I so attached to that? This is life, and so nothing that's life is left out of PET. As Frank Farrelly says in Provocative Therapy, life is hot, sticky, and wet, and so it's not something which is just straightforward and simple. But strangely enough, when people get to see the choices they're making really clearly, then they understand that they're choosing those things. Excuse me, and they're able to make their choices more consciously. Let me say a few things about this. First of all, for those of you who want to, if you want to learn PET, you can learn this in our PET Practitioner certification program. This is outlined online, and you can go on to EFTdownunder.com and have a look at this. It involves a combination of live training, supervision, reading and research, demonstrating PET in front of a group, show that you've used it with a number of clients and use it as a technique in your practice, and then have ongoing supervision. There's some cautions about this approach. Caring is absolutely crucial. The way you say it is the way you would say this to your very best friend. And so if you don't feel that connection, then don't do it. And Frank always said, if the client isn't laughing at least some of the time, it's probably not provocative therapy. And we say the same thing about PET. So if there's no laughter at all, it may not be provocative energy techniques, and it might be destructive. So keep your heart open. And if you want to go away and try some of this, then don't just try. People want to go, oh, I want to try that approach with the client that I'm having trouble with. Don't use it with the client you're having trouble with. Use it with a client you already love or that you really like. And then it'll be easy to catch the essence of the affectionate banter between close friends, which is an affectionate teasing with your heart open. It's one of the easiest approaches to get wrong, and so you've got to keep that rapport and that strong connection. And if you ever lose rapport, then you apologise and you go back and get rapport before you continue. And I've just repeated the same point there on what I was saying before. Now, as you may or may not know, I'm doing the first ever PET online training. We're actually starting next week. So for those of you who are watching the recording of this, it may be next week or we may have one in future. You can go online to EFTdownunder.com and look at training to find that out. But if you want to look now specifically at the program that I'm offering, which starts next week, it's at EFTdownunder.com/intros-PET-online-training/. And I think you'll be sent there straight after this webinar. But if you're just watching the recording, then go there. We're going to have online coaching. So this is how it works. It'll be on a platform called Zoom, where everybody can see everybody else, and it's just like being a live workshop. We have people all over the world, and you can do the chat just like here, but it will not just be me, it'll be interactive. So not just like, you know, Irene and I working, it's actually, we can see everybody in the group. And I'm restricting it to 20 people maximum, so that we'll all be able to have a chance to connect with each other. There's 6 90-minute coaching modules via video coaching, and Zoom is really a fantastic program. The sessions will be recorded, so you can review them as often as you like. I'm going to go through all the basics of how to use PET and how to use Paradox and some of the key paradoxical and provocative techniques. The fee is 495 Australian dollars, which is a lot less in euros and in US dollars, and definitely a lot less in pounds still, even though they've gone down. They're still a 2 for 1 or something. And for those of you who are on here and register within the next 72 hours, I'm going to give you the $100 discount. So it'll be $395 Australian. In fact, if you're registering from overseas, you won't pay tax as well, so it'll be even less than that. You get the $100 discount by going through and clicking through to pay. And when you get to checkout, put the code PROVOKEME, all capitals, in online, and you'll be able to register that program for $100 off. Now, if you're watching this at a time later on when we don't have this program being offered, make contact with me. We'll find out about when the programs are coming up, and I will extend the same discount to you for whatever program is coming up. The other thing is, as part of the program, you're going to get the PET manual ebook, which is, I don't know, it's 250 or so pages of stuff on how to use this approach. It includes all of our handouts that we give out in our workshops and all that stuff. And that's $49. You get that for free included in the program. So if you want to come to that program, I would love to see you there. And I'll see you online next week. So anybody, as I say, who registers, let me give you a deadline. By it's Monday. It will be, the program is on Thursday next week, same time as this program was here. And so it's 4 p.m. Perth time, West Australia time. I think that's 9 a.m. in London, is that right? People in London? At 10 a.m. in France and Italy and so on. 6 p.m. in Sydney, Melbourne, etc. But yeah, it'll be on Thursday. So you have until this Thursday to register for that. Yeah, so it is 9 a.m. London time. All right, we've gone a little bit over time. So I hope that was interesting, useful. I hope you, if you'd like to follow up more about PET, there is some stuff on our website at EFTdownunder.com. You can go on there and have a look at a little video of me and David talking about the approach. Thanks very much, Rachel and Naomi and Sue. Appreciate your comments. Thank you, Mark. Yes, if we change our story, we can change our life. One of the great things about PET is that whatever story you've been using to block yourself or lock yourself down, we put a bit of humour in there, and that story will never be the same. You won't fall for it the same way in future as you do now once you've been infected with a provocative virus. So thank you so much for being part of this. I appreciate you taking the time to spend time with me live, particularly those of you who have come live and been watching along and tapping along, and hopefully you're still tapping and you get the benefits of tapping regardless. So thanks, Judy. Thanks, Lucia. Thanks, Maravi and Tony. And yeah, we'll see you round like a rissole. Lisa, thank you. All right, well, yeah, has been too long. Like to see you soon. So programs, by the way, have a PET workshop coming up in Italy. I'll also be over in Paris in September, and we'll be using provocative style, but that's a business workshop. Have a look online and register for the newsletter at EFTdownunder.com, because I will have workshops coming up in Melbourne and Perth, and then next year in Sydney and so on. And also I have my book 100% Yes coming out soon too, so stay tuned for that. Thanks, Lucinda. Ciao for now, everybody. Let me just pop out for a moment, turn off our recording. Francois, I look forward to seeing you in Paris soon. Bye, Jeanette. Look forward to seeing you in Paris soon too. Okay. Bye-bye.